Recording.
And we're off. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar. We're going to jump right into it. We're not going to waste too much time here because we got a lot of information to cover. I don't need to explain to everybody what is going on in the world today. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of fear. And that's resulting because there's just so many unknowns right now. We see the stock market plunging, and a lot of people are having questions about real estate, and particularly real estate investing. And over the last few days, I've had numerous calls from people and clients asking questions, and I thought, well, the heck with it. Instead of me trying to answer everything, I'm going to assemble the brightest minds in Ontario when it comes to real estate investing, and see if we can get everybody together and answer some of your questions. And we're probably looking at a nice roundtable discussion, and so we're going to try to answer your questions, and hopefully we're going to reduce some of the fears or quell some of the anxiety that's out there, right? Depending on how you feel. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to post your questions in the chat box I think it's at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and post your questions in there, raise your hand, give it a whirl. So tonight, without further ado, I'm going to introduce one by one our superstars that we have online tonight. And let me explain that the people who are here tonight on the webinar, they are real estate investing experts, but they're also experts within their own niches. And that's what makes them very special. They're very, very knowledgeable. And so I purposely reached out to them because they bring so much to the table, especially within their expertise. So let's first introduce Kayla Andrade. Hey, Kayla.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
Good, good. So just tell us quickly, what do you do? What's your gig?
What's my gig? It's my calling.
Yes, exactly.
So I am the founder of Ontario Landlords Watch, which is an online chat group for landlords, paralegals, property managers, and real estate agents to discuss the issues in the RTA and the LTB. But most importantly, we are gathered to advocate for changes within the RTA and the LTB to help us be able to form a better housing system that's good for good landlords, good tenants, and obviously the taxpayers.
Yeah, awesome. You work very hard. I know that. I see your webinars or your FaceTime lives, and I know how much effort you put into it. So thank you for that. Next, we've got Christian. Sorry, Christian, I'm not going to say your last name, man.
Still, apparently I still have to train you on that, Tony.
Sorry.
So for all those on the call, my name is Christian Spillfogle. You got that, Tony?
Yeah.
And I'm a full-time real estate investor. I focus primarily on multi-unit residential, commercial residential, as well as light industrial, commercial, and retail spaces.
Cool. Awesome. And you're in Ottawa, right?
Correct. I'm in Ottawa.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. And let's give it up also for Genevieve Walton. If you're going to talk about Airbnb and short-term rentals, you have to say the name of Genevieve Walton. Hey, Jen.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, top shelf. Thank you for joining us this evening, eh? It's great.
Thanks for having me.
I know you're very busy, and I've got some questions for you. I'm really interested in hearing your answers.
Perfect. Well, I'm excited to help.
Yeah. Now, what's the name of your company?
It's called Short and Sweet B&B. So we manage about 200 Airbnbs in downtown Ottawa, Trumbull, and Gatineau.
Wow. Okay. And what about Flex?
Absolutely. So Flex focuses on mid to long-term property management. So executive furnished stays, as well as unfurnished long-term student rentals and just regular rentals as well. So we're definitely seeing some changes in both the short-term, medium-term, and the long-term market right now.
Right. For those who don't know, it's been very impressive watching Jen adapt to the short-term rental regulations here in Ottawa. She's a leader in that area, and we're fortunate to have her here. All right, let's give it up for Shannon Murray. Hey, Shannon. Oh, you're gonna unmute? Okay, so
There we are.
here you are.
Hi.
Woo! Hey.
I was private chatting, sorry.
That's okay. Oops. So you're in Barrie, and
Yes.
what's your specialty? Like you're an investor and
Hey, so I'm Shannon Murray, Simcoe County based. That's Barrie, Orillia, Bradford, Innisfil, surrounding areas. Realtor, investor focused realtor. So helping Canadians realize their wealth through real estate, specifically geographically in this area, and have been doing so for almost 20 years. But I know it's hard to believe because I'm only 25, so I started young.
I was going to say 20, but okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
Hey, fun fact about Shannon, in case you guys don't know, she is a former professional dancer. Am I right?
Oh, you got to be careful how you say that.
Oh, yes. You know what I mean.
Professional, as in ballerina, jazz,
correct.
Modern jazz trained. Yes.
Well, I thought the word professional sort of excluded everything else.
Sure.
No.
But yes.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and I think there's one last person, and Elizabeth Kelly. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hi.
Hey, listen, you're usually in my seat, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
How's it feel being on the other side?
It's kind of nice. I think I'm just going to have a nap and wait for you to get to me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What's going on?
I've been a real estate investor for 15 years. We built a portfolio mainly in the long-term buy, rent, and hold market. I've also done quite a few rent-to-owns across the country, actually. And we have a property management company. We're approaching about 400 units that we own/manage. And I've recently headed into the coaching business because I was a trainer for Rich Dad for 8 years, and I could see what a tough time people had translating from what they know into what they're actually doing. So I'm really excited to be able to work with newer investors and offer something that, you know, some of the lessons that I learned the hard way. It'd be really nice if other people didn't have to.
It's awesome that you do that, especially with the newer investors, because you get to mold them, and I'll carefully use the word brainwash, you know, like to help them along. And because, you know, they fall into certain habits and traps, and you have the expertise to be able to help them move forward and succeed. So anybody who works with new investors and is honest and ethic has your level of ethics, and I really think that's cool. So
thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. Thanks for
You're
inviting
welcome.
us this evening.
All right. I promised that this would be rapid fire questions sort of thing. Now, anytime you have questions, pop it into the chat box, and I'll take a look once in a while and ask some questions. So I'm going to start off with the realtor in Barrie, Shannon. Ready?
Yes, ready.
Right. So this came in from an investor in Ottawa, but it does apply to everybody. What advice do you have for less seasoned investors looking to invest in real estate in this sort of environment? Buy now or wait until the dust settles?
Perfect question. I love this question.
Do you?
Yes. Don't wait. Buy now.
Okay.
Simple. Why? Because right now everybody is fueled by fear, and buying a home is different than buying an investment property. And I would say take advantage of the market. Like, it's a totally different mindset, because this is a business and it's all about numbers and it's all about strategy. And most importantly, now is a really great time to interview your realtor. So focus on the one who's going to be investor savvy, and lean on the one who's probably going to give the same advice that I would. And in fact, I know, Tony, you and I can refer investor focused, but honestly, having done this for so long, we've seen the highs and lows of how this works. And this honestly, not to sound morbid, but just strategically thinking is the best time to buy. And
Right.
if you're just starting out, it's not emotion, it's not fear-based, and you need to lean on the experts to help guide you through and get you through those numbers. And especially with the way the rates are, even better.
Okay. So what's happening in Barrie market-wise? We have COVID-19 out there. Are you seeing an increase in listings, an increase in sales? What's happening there?
You know, it's very interesting because I was texting a few other colleagues I know in other brokerages before we started this chat, and I was like, hey, how's the market for you? And she's like, oh my gosh, really slow. And I know for her, she's probably more residential based, but I mean, I haven't seen any changes. In fact, we've still seen consistent in some of the showings. A lot of people are just changing how they're doing things, more virtual. You know, open houses are virtual as well now. And, but we haven't really seen a decrease very much. And in fact, we had multiple offers. There was a property that my client was interested in yesterday. And it went on the market 4 days ago, like on the Friday, just before the weekend, no offers until yesterday, 8 p.m. There were 6 offers on it, and it went over asking firm.
Yeah. And I think that's a similar, that's what's happening in Ottawa here. And I think it's probably happening in many markets. We don't see it like a slowdown yet. Possibly next week, maybe when the COVID-19 numbers increase in terms of those who have been infected or have the flu, maybe those numbers will decrease, you know, in terms of sales and listings. But right now, it's almost business as usual in a very unusual time, for sure. All right, going to move on. Got a next question.
So Tony, if I may just add to what Shannon was saying, part of what we need to look at is asset classes. So, you know, when it comes to small single-family homes, etc., I think what Shannon was saying is spot on. And to your point, that's probably going to, you know, slow down a little bit as people start to reassess their investing priorities. But if you take a look at other classes such as industrial, commercial, retail space, etc., the timing may actually be a little bit further out. There's no doubt small businesses are going to get shaken loose, especially companies that were kind of tight on cash flow. They may not survive through this. So vacancy rates are going to drive the value of a lot of those properties down.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Kayla, you're next. Hey. You ready? All right. So here's a question that's probably right up your bailiwick. What's your advice to landlords for tenants who won't be able to pay rent? And I'm talking about tenants who are legitimately affected by COVID-19. So how would you proceed with that? What would you do as a landlord if someone says, "Oh, sorry, I can't pay"?
Well, first and foremost, we want to talk about the federal government coming out today with certain programs that are going to be geared towards keeping people in with groceries, with their rent. So that's a good note for landlords based on these programs. And it's going to be made, they have different programs, one for people who are the working, who are going to be able to fast track getting on EI. And then they have another programs for people who are either self-employed or, you know, this way the money's going to come to them. Now that is probably the application process won't be until the beginning, I've heard, of April. So what I would advise our landlords to do is be very lenient on what is currently happening, but also give some education that just because of the fact that the banks are deferring the different types of payments, we do expect rent to be paid, and educate them on how they can seek assistance in getting onto these type of programs. And based on the landlord and tenant board shutting down and the way that they've they put a hold on the sheriff evictions, this is going to be something where even though we know about what's happening in the in the world, we still want to follow our procedures and still give that N4 notice. That's just because of the fact that for us, it's going to be a little easier for us to catch up on. And I think for our tenants who think that they just can't, they don't have to pay because the landlords having their mortgage deferred, I think we can catch some landlords are going to get burnt by these type of tenants who are just not educated. So we're looking at trying to educate these tenants in multiple different online groups in order to say, you know, thank you for making your payment that you can. And hopefully, you know, we just hope for the best through this difficult time. But if the Landlord and Tenant Board and the Residential Tenancy Act was so horrible from the get-go, we might be able to sustain this type of pandemic. But the way things are now is like, it's going to be very, I think it's the beginning of something that's much, much worse because landlords are taking things into their own hands.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I think it's really important. A lesson learned that's going to come out of this for many investors will be, building up your reserve funds. No one knew that this was coming. Nobody knew that this was going to happen. So it's way out there, but it's for those of us who have built up reserve funds, we're in a little bit better position sort of thing. So I think it just goes back to basic teachings about when you're analyzing properties, when you buy for cash flow, make sure that you put money aside in your reserve funds to help you get through the tough times when tenants can't pay in situations for whatever that might be.
I agree.
Yep. Cool. Okay.
It's to the point where you got to make sure that we used to be able to say, don't be a landlord unless you can cover that tenant for at least 6 months. This is a whole new different ballgame that we're going to get used to. And I think after all this is said and done, we're going to be, we won't be looking at real estate the same, I think.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And Elizabeth?
Yes, Tony.
What's been your approach? You have multifamily commercial properties, right? You have 5+ unit buildings, that type of thing.
Yeah.
What's been your approach in terms of communication to tenants?
Well, we've sort of got, anytime you're managing properties for other people, or you have joint venture partners, you sort of, as the kind of working partner, you've got responsibilities on both sides. We're always like the filling in the Oreo, right? And we're only doing our job properly when neither party is 100% happy with us. So we did an initial email to our owners and JV partners, and we said, guys, like, this is what's going on. We're going to assume worst case scenario here. We're going to assume across the board nobody pays rent. And these are the things that you can be doing, could or should be doing to prepare yourself. So, stopping all auto payments out of your bank account so that you get to determine, who is going to get paid, who, if my gas bill is $200, maybe I only pay 100 of it, that people aren't just going into my bank account and taking money out of my reserves. There was a really interesting point brought up today in terms of going to your lenders right away and saying, I can't make mortgage payments. That may raise a red flag for lenders, and they're going to go, geez, you know what? Like, we haven't even missed a month's rent yet. And you're already coming to me saying that you can't make it. Like, why don't you have any reserves? We're not going to, we're not going to work with you on refinances in the future, or we're not going to, extend lines of credit or credit cards or even just overdraft if we know you're already in crisis and we haven't even passed, the first day that rent is due. So you want to be very careful and strategic in that conversation. Once I sort of have those pieces to make sure that, my owners are in a position where they're set up as best they can, managing their cash flow and their funds, then the next piece is obviously to go to the tenant. So we've already sent one communication out. We closed our office Monday at 4:00. So my office staff, they're, at home. All three of them don't have childcare, so because the daycares are closed. So they're sort of looking after that. They're all working sort of a couple of hours here and there just to kind of keep everything moving forward. We're still going to do move-ins. We're still going to do move-outs, but we'll do it, with as little contact as possible.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of preparing. So in my initial email to my tenants, I basically said, hey, we know these are extenuating circumstances. We're here for you. Here's the options to pay rent so that you're not coming into the office because the office is closed. So we gave them all the, kind of online options. And then we said, we are, please continue to let us know of any maintenance issues, but we won't be actually doing work unless it's urgent. We gave them all of the contact information, emergency line, everything else. My plan is to send a second communication within the next 24, 48 hours and basically say, hey guys, we know some of you might be in a position where you're struggling, please reach out. I'm not going to send a blanket email and tell everybody, hey, just get in touch with us and we'll figure something out, we'll sort of go on.
You have to be proactive.
Exactly. But it's a very tough line to walk because, you don't want to be the jerk in the corner going, pay me my rent. This is what the, this is what the contract says, pay me my rent. You have to work with people and be respectful. And, the vast majority of our tenants are fantastic people. And I don't think that they're going to be, the people who were already struggling or the people who, didn't like, their landlord or whatever, those are the ones who are much more apt to use this as an excuse. There are a ton of amazing people out there, and hopefully, we have them in our units, and they're going to at least pay, if I can get 50% on the 1st and 50% on the 15th, I can work with that. If it's a matter of cash flow, then sorry. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I just realized I've been talking a lot.
It's great info. That's awesome. Thank you.
But if anybody, I'll throw it out there. If anybody wants to see a copy of the letters that we've sent, throw me a quick email, and I'm happy to share with you the template that I used and give you guys a, kind of make it a little bit easier, right?
Yeah, and that's gold right there. That's awesome, because a lot of people not sure what to put in the letter, and to have it coming from yourself, then that's gold. Hey, Christian.
Yes, sir.
Yo. Listen, I know you've got property, in the Ottawa area, and I know you have businesses who are tenants of yours. All right. And so tell us, what's been the impact of COVID on your investing business in terms of that? What are businesses having a hard time sustaining, and how are you helping them?
Sure. It's still early days, in terms of what's going to happen. Clearly, small businesses have a lot more risk on their shoulders right now, because a lot of the programs that have been announced so far are really targeted towards individuals, which is the right thing to do. In small businesses, we heard some more information just rolling out today, specifically to help small businesses. Some of it looks like it's going to go through BDC or Business Development Corporation, which is specifically tasked by the federal government to help small businesses. And then there's the 10% wage assistance associated with small businesses.
That's pretty low, eh? Isn't it, compared to other places, I heard?
It is. I mean, in certain parts of Europe, they were at 75%. So it was more a 75-25 kind of thing, which in my opinion is actually a better way to do this, because you really want small businesses to be ready to go once we come out of this crisis and not have to be recreated. So I think there's going to be more to come. The biggest issue a lot of the small businesses are going to have in the short term is managing cash flow. A lot of small businesses are undercapitalized. Yeah. And just coincidentally, I had started talking with BDC in order to just proactively help my tenants before all this stuff really started to hit. And maybe in the back of my mind was what was going on in China, right, that provoked it. But I started talking to BDC about loan assistance programs. Even before the government started to intervene, there are programs available to help small businesses, including $100,000 loans that they're prepared to do with an online application that's based primarily on the individual's credit score and not on their proof of income, etc. So I am organizing something BDC with our small businesses, and they really appreciate the fact that we started doing that in order to help bridge their current situation. And some of the small businesses are going to suffer right? For example, the retail businesses that I have, fortunately, the ones that I have are well capitalized, so I think they're going to be okay. But I've got some smaller startups in one of my office buildings that are relatively young, haven't built their working capital, we're barely cash flow, and they're starting to freak out a little bit.
Yeah.
I've already had calls earlier this week, how can I get out of my lease, etc.
Yeah.
So
what are you saying to them at that time? Like if somebody approaches you and says that, what do you do?
Well, I don't want to be the jerk, as Elizabeth said, right? They do have a commercial lease in place, but in reality, what I'm prepared to do is to work with them.
Yeah.
I want to see those businesses succeed. I think that's best from a long-term perspective. Where BDC may not be able to help, maybe I can help in terms of extending some short-term loans for them or giving them some help in terms of bridging, or maybe allowing them to adjust their business model, et cetera, in order to be able to get to where they go. I see termination of a lease as a last resort, but at the end of the day, I don't want somebody to completely, I don't want them to go insolvent in their personal life associated with this as well.
Right.
But the other piece that we should think about too is that, as an old boss of mine used to say, never waste a good crisis. And this is also an opportunity to take a look at where we can improve our business. And some of those small businesses may actually be able to take advantage of this situation. I don't mean that in a negative way, but be able to springboard this into larger opportunities. And that was the other reason I was looking at BDC as a way to fund this stuff.
Cool. I think in terms of looking at opportunities, and Kayla, I think we talked a little bit about this being potentially an opportunity for landlords to be out there supporting changing people's mindsets and opinions of landlords. In some cases, and rightly so, landlords have crappy reputations, but most landlords are good people in my experience. So I think I don't know what you think, Kayla, but I think it's a good opportunity for landlords to change the narrative and, to be out there and educating people and helping people to change, how people view us.
That is true. We're going to have we have an A and we have a B. So we got the ones who can financially afford it, and they will give the breaks, and they will have a ton of posts out there that my landlord's the greatest. They told me not to pay my April's rent. And we're putting that into like installment payments now for May. And then we have our other side where it's actually going to be crucial for them to be collecting the rent, because they may not even be approved through the different banks programs that out there. Maybe it's private lending, maybe it's not one of the big banks that they're dealing with, and now that person needs the money, or they're going to be coming in, and I can see landlords locking out their tenants. Based on what's happening. So we can see it from both sides. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's because the LTV is such a mess right now. And a lot of people have already been in a very hardship situation before this. So this is why it could go either way.
Yeah. I think the announcement that they postponed or closed the LTV, essentially, moving hearings from 5 months, or probably now we're looking at 8 months, that type of thing. And it's created an atmosphere for some people to think, well, hey, I can take advantage of that. And I think that's out there. And so I know that we've shared some information, and that we've seen that out there. And it's about being proactive and hopefully we can get in front of that.
It's definitely out there, and being on CP24 and having it right into the breaking news and giving the idea to people who may be borderline on the fence of like, okay, let's see how long I can run staying in this property now before I have to relocate to another one. Because in reality, there's no repercussions for them. You really need to track them down to find out where they bank or where they work, but they can close their bank account, or they can relocate their job. And that is where, you can't get it.
Yeah. As Denise says, it's be firm and fair, right? Right, Denise? That's what I'm hearing. So, yeah. Hey, Jen, are you there? Genevieve?
Oh, sorry. There I am.
There you go. Hey.
Hey,
welcome
how's it going?
back. Hey, sorry I took so long. I almost went 2 rounds without talking to you.
That's okay.
We
I've been
missed you.
listening. It's been very interesting.
Okay, so in terms of short-term rentals and Airbnb, we think that, at least in the headlines, we're seeing that COVID is impacting tourism. It may impact students, student rentals, that type of thing. Maybe military staff, embassy staff who may be looking for short to mid-term type of rentals. What are you seeing out there? Like, what's the status? What's Airbnb doing? How are you coping with it? All that stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely been, I would say, a more challenging week than we've experienced. I would say I'm very blessed that I have a team that continuously pivots with every crazy idea I have. So they're used to this stuff, but this is definitely one that caught us off guard. So what happened was around Sunday, we saw an influx of cancellations. And originally we were telling guests that, we will be following the Airbnb's policy. So they do have something called an extenuating circumstance clause, which essentially means if you're sick or if your plane gets canceled or that kind of stuff, that you can potentially get a refund under that. Otherwise, it falls under the host's cancellation policy. And most of ours are something called strict cancellation, which means pretty much you either get 50% or nothing back, is the way that it was mostly done through our properties. They then came out and said pretty much between March 14th and April 14th, if you had booked a stay during that time period, that you were eligible for 100% refund regardless of the host's cancellation policy. So this put, I would say, a lot of people with very empty calendars, no bookings, and kind of wondering what would happen next.
Yeah.
The next morning we woke up to, I would say, a huge influx of bookings.
Wow.
So most of it is people either coming back from overseas and maybe don't have a home. We also have some of our hosts who are owner occupied who have come back, but we have their place rented.
Yeah.
So they're then renting the Airbnbs. We have students moving out of Ottawa University, for example,
Yeah.
into these Airbnbs.
Sorry, I was going to ask you, have you had any requests for people to rent one of your units to self isolate, for 14 days? Have you had any requests like that?
There's a lot of requests for that.
Wow. And what are you doing? Like that must be like for the owners, like and for your staff, it must be kind of worrisome.
Yeah, we are concerned. I mean, we did do extra training with our staff. If you're coming from overseas, we have asked questions before booking. And if they're coming, they have to stay a minimum 14 days with us in the properties. And they've also been, every property has been dropped off extra cleaning supplies, and they have to wipe down the properties before they can go in. And I have to go into every single property before a cleaner is allowed to go into a property.
Right.
So we're trying our best to keep it as protected as possible and safe, but also making sure that we are having that income. I do foresee March actually is going okay, not great, but okay. As long as your calendar actually got wiped out, it turned out to be a good thing, because then you got those people that needed accommodations for 2 weeks, 2 months, longer term stays. A lot of snowbirds, for example, coming back needing housing as well. So that ended up being a good thing. The only ones that might be impacted were actually people whose calendars didn't get wiped out. So if you had sporadic bookings here or there, it was harder to get those properties booked. I did make, I would say, a more aggressive move and dropped our prices very aggressively down to get as much filled as possible.
Yeah.
So a good example is we had an Airbnb last weekend that was booked at $399 in Mont-Tremblant, which is totally dead now. And now you can book that Airbnb for $74.
Have you seen anybody want to list their property, like their Airbnb? Have they said, forget it, I'm done, sort of like a panic move?
I haven't seen that yet, but that's mostly because we have Flex, that's a good sister to Short and Sweet. So we've actually been recently, I would say, more integrating onto the Flex side regardless than signing new Short and Sweet clients, unless it's a owner occupied or you're leaving for periods of time. I would say, to be quite honest, that midterm market just got very, very hot. It has lots of potential. And then I would also say it shows the, I guess, strength of our landlords and the fact that they've diversified within their building. So we used to call them, I guess, anchor leases, which essentially means that you would have in a triplex 2 anchor leases, so 12-month leases, and then you put the Airbnb as your third one. And so I would say that's still a very strong model, and I'm glad we pushed our landlords in that direction.
Interesting. Cool. Kayla, I know you have to head out soon, so I want to toss another question at you, or some of your thoughts.
The baby's either quiet or they I'm not too sure.
If you have to run, that's okay. Just shut it off and we'll move on.
Okay.
So what would you say to people who are in limbo right now with the LTB? Like, they have hearings, or they've done all the paperwork, they've submitted them, and things are delayed. What's your advice to them? Like, if the hearings are delayed, is there anything they can do?
You want the political answer, or you want?
I want the real stuff. I want Kayla to tell me.
You know what? You got to say that it all depends on the circumstances, I would suggest. If you have someone that, for non-payment of rent, and it's coming down to, if you can financially support that person, I would let it go. But if you have a situation where there's a danger to you, or there's a danger to tenants, that's when I would be making a lot of recommendations into making a letter to the MPP informing them of the circumstance. Also send it to the police officers and speak with the police officers to let them know here. And we're honestly, a few of our landlords are experiencing that right now, and their chance, what they would like to do is lock the doors, bar the doors, and house their belongings. But it coming down to, it's to eat or to be eaten sometimes for these landlords. So they're looking at the fact that they're willing to take the fine, because in the long run, when this thing starts opening up again and we start seeing an influx of enforced notice, we're going to see horrible times of the landlord and tenant board. And if we have an adjudicator that's going to say, sorry, it's through the pandemic, we're going to give the tenant X amount of time to catch up. Meanwhile, there's now programs. So we got to look at the fact that these programs are out. We're hoping that there's more programs going to be there for the tenants to pay. And unfortunately, they're going to use it as an excuse, and we're going to have our professional tenants out there using this as an excuse. So we got to kind of just be able to defer, like, what's for real and what's people are taking advantage of.
Yeah, and it's really hard to sift through that, right? To find out, what their intentions are. It's difficult to do. And I think my greatest concern, the things I'm thinking about most are really the women and children who are in shitty situations where they're trapped and they can't move away, due to the virus, due to the LTB. They're in some real trouble. Like, they're in some trouble there. Like, what kind of support can be provided to them to get them out of that situation? It's just me talking. It's not a direct question to you, but it it is a concern.
And you know what, like, sadly, because of the rules that are changing, and we have Bill 184 that just came out, which we're really upset with. And right now I'm glad that, they're not sitting right now, because it gives us some time to really sit back and digest what Bill 184 is. But at the same time, we have to look at that we have tenants out there that are pretty much extorting our landlords on to say, like, we know you need us out and we want $10,000. And we just have a friend of ours that had the same situation happen to her. The tenant wants $10,000 to get out of her rental unit. So we're going to see that a little bit more. But again, at least the landlords have that option to be able to do cash for keys in the time like this. But again, it's going to be hard for them. There's already a very low vacancy rate anyway. So for them to want to take that cash, they're going to struggle getting a unit elsewhere, because some landlords are not even doing showings.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, thank you. If you have to go, just thanks.
I'll do a wave, and then I'll
that's cool.
Take off. But right now, I'll put myself on mute.
Sure. Hey, Shannon.
Hi.
Howdy. Hello.
Hi. Hello.
You work with some investors who do renovations, right? Correct?
Yes.
Basement suites, that type of thing. What's your advice to your clients who want to do projects or are in the middle of projects and they're having difficulty finding trades, let's say, somebody to help build a suite, or, you know, what can they do?
I can't give away my trade secret, but we're not having that issue, are we, Mr. Client who's online right now with us?
Oh.
We're not having that issue. Again, we have our experts who are willing, ready, and able, and project manage and have other teams and the experts who will continue. So as we add more to our inventory, they're going out with us if we're able to get the conditional period, and they're going out with us to still scope the areas, and I don't know, as far as we're concerned, we're still on track. So
I think people who are working with you are very fortunate, and I think anybody who's looking to get into a project or looking to buy right now or even sell, it's really critical, like you mentioned, to have your team in place beforehand before doing anything. And your team, talking about, you know, your investor focused realtor, your mortgage financing person is super key. Having a lawyer, appraiser, everybody there. And you have to make sure before you get into any activity, you have to make sure that they're available, right? Some people are just, they're closing a shop, they're going home, they're not available to help with a closing, for example. Maybe your favorite property inspector isn't available. They're worried, so they're shutting down. So it's really making sure that those people are there, available, and you know that they're not going to scamper away at the last second.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a crisis. I mean, that's just the way that it's going to be. We're not going to sugarcoat it, and it's definitely very serious because there is no there isn't a cure, but it's, our teams are being very, even our home inspector emailed us the other day and said, listen, everybody, we're taking this very seriously. Of course, our staff is our family. And here are the requirements that we need in order to continue to be efficient. So we need to have, the surfaces and areas sanitized, wiped down, and their guys are going to go in and take every precaution that they can. And they're asking to reduce the amount of people that will be in attendance at the home inspection. So they're still taking their business forward. And, in terms of our contractor teams that we have, as far as I know, they're still, in line to meet the deadlines, because we've got our closings that are coming up, and the lawyers are able to work with the Law Society, and they've now been able to do everything that they can as well online, and do everything for the registrations, for the payments of deposits and the transfers, large transfer value. So they're doing their best to make it the best of a situation. My take on this is it's either going to make things more smoother and more efficient, but I definitely think for future, should something like this ever happen again, I think it will be more fluid, and I really think it's going to change the way things are done. Yeah,
we'll have a good review of how, what happened, and develop some best practices if it happens again. Mm-hmm. And hey, Elizabeth, you there?
Yes, Mr. Tony.
Howdy. Hello.
Hi.
Hey. So maybe we can talk about some of the actual investment strategies. Now, you're a rent-to-own expert.
Yes.
You've closed many transactions, which is, for people who aren't familiar with rent-to-own, the actual completion or closings of rent-to-own deals is quite low. But you have a very successful closing rate. So what are you seeing? What advice would you offer for people who are rent-to-own investors or managing the deals? Like, what are your tips? What would you say?
Well, the thing to keep in mind with rent-to-own clients is, if they are impacted in terms of, they've lost their jobs, they've lost their ability to make their payments, most people's contracts will say that the tenant buyers have voided their right to purchase. The contracts are written that way to provide the protection for the owner. My recommendation is to, work with your clients, work with your tenant buyers. Don't say, well, if you don't pay your rent in full on the 1st of May, I mean, they know and fully appreciate that you've got, mortgage to pay, you've got taxes to pay. I mean, they're paying all the utilities typically in a normal rent to own. But you want to definitely make an effort to work with people. At the end of the day, the way we always look at rent-to-owns, and I mean, we've done them in Alberta, after the market started dipping, where the tenant buyer was supposed to buy the property for more than the appraisal. Like, what it really comes down to, I find with rent-to-owns a lot of times is, you're trying to be a decent human being. And it's about, figuring out what your client's needs are and really being creative and strategic with it. So, if your tenant buyer is coming up to a purchase of the house and they've just lost their job, or they've just been, put on EI because, their employer can't keep them when they're not working. I mean, that's a tremendous impact, particularly if they've been in the house 2 or 3 years, like that is a devastating blow for them, and it's not their fault. So, you want to look for options, whether it's extending the rent to own contract, the term, whether it's, stepping in and being willing to offer to hold a second mortgage so that they can still move forward with the purchase. I think rent to owns, you have people who have a vested interest in the property. They've probably done a good job looking after it. And it's really, that I think is part of the reason I like that strategy so much, is because you really get the feeling that you're helping people. And this is not the time to step away and say, sorry, but this is just about this for me. Now, that being said, there will be people who will be, owners and investors who will be struggling. I'm not saying, to put their needs ahead of yours. What I'm saying is to sit down or have a phone call and talk really honestly about absolutely what's needed and how to work together to get through this.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, the last thing you want in this particular environment is the tenant buyers to go, well, my contract's broken, what's the point in me staying, or to just, and leave you with a vacant property, or to stay and not pay.
Yeah. And that's what's great about having you guys on here, because I know everybody who's speaking tonight, and the common message that I'm hearing is that you have to work with your tenants. You have to be a human, you have to show some empathy there and work together. And that's what I love about you guys is that that's what you guys are like. And that's why I love being associated with you guys. So it's very, very cool. Hey, Christian.
If I could just add to that before you go to Christian. And one of the things that I saw someone post, another investor, was, and I saw someone ask a question about, what about the tenants or something who could, need to apply or whatever. And Susan White Livermore had a very, I have to give her credit because that's who I saw post it. She said, I would like to, it's about communication and relationship with the tenants. And she said, I will actually help my tenants fill out the forms or whatever. And I think that's a great thing to do, because not only are you showing that you're caring, but the ulterior motive is also because you want it done properly and efficiently, so then you can still get your money at the end too. So I just think it's a great way to show a partnership and show that you care in an otherwise overwhelming or intimidating situation for someone.
That's right. And for people who are landlords who are offering rental rebates or working with their tenants, it creates that close bond. It creates like a relationship and helps you move forward. And let's say something pops up down the road, 3, 4, 5 months or a year from now, well, they'll remember that, right? They'll remember that, hey, this guy helped me out, and it goes both ways. So it's really important to manage the relationship with your tenants and really just be a good human. I think that's key. I have a question. Someone typed in a question. They asked, what advice do you have for investors who have a few properties in Ottawa and are considering selling to take advantage of what was a hot market before the pandemic? Well, I can tell you straight off that it is still a hot market. It is still busy. We are seeing multiple offers in Ottawa for sure. The number of buyers that are out there haven't decreased. There are tons of buyers, just like there were before and have been for what seems to be at least the last 2 years. The number of listings are still happening. We're just starting to spring market. So there are some listings. Now they're not super high, but I think that's probably a combination of maybe a few sellers who are skeptical or worried about listing during this time. And also just because the Ottawa market is super tight. The inventory has been very low for at least, last couple of years sort of thing. So if you are thinking about selling, I think it's actually a really, really good time in Ottawa. I can't speak to other markets, but in Ottawa, I think it's a really good time. And the reasons for that is, one, we have the interest rate announcement. There are tons of buyers out there who are still looking for properties during COVID-19. Now that may change a little bit starting next week when we start seeing higher cases or reported cases of COVID-19. But for now, it's still very strong. We're also, in terms of buying or selling in Ottawa, the market is still strong because we have 160,000 federal government jobs that aren't going anywhere. And historically in Ottawa, we've been buffered. If you look back in 2008, if you're thinking 9/11, anytime there's been any turmoil, Ottawa, we're not totally immune from it. We do have some hits, and we do hit some dips, but we don't feel it as much as other markets, that's for sure. So I think in terms of the market and price point, somebody asked me, is the price point, are home values going to drop? And I don't see them dropping, like a general rule across the city. I think that because of the number of buyers that are still out there, and because I think many sellers are going to, or not many, I think there will be some sellers who will just be more of a wait and see attitude. Let's see how it plays out. So there's going to be even fewer listings on the market, which means prices will increase. So that's where I'm seeing. I think also we're probably going to see more impact, or some impact, when it comes to finding tenants. Especially when, I think it was Nick Legault who posted, he made a good point, student rentals, for example. Many students are heading home. They're going to be with their family. They're not even looking to rent right now. They've decided, forget it, but they're just going to go home and let things play out. So possibly a higher vacancy rate with student rentals, maybe even in Ottawa for national defense employees who are transferring from all over the world back to Ottawa. Many of them are buying, some rent. Some of those transfer plans have been postponed or canceled for now. So they won't be, looking for places to rent in the Ottawa area. So I just think that if you're looking to sell right now, I think it's still a good time. And until the market tells us otherwise in terms of number of listings and sales, I would definitely be looking forward to sell. It's just how you go about selling will change. We're not going to hold open houses. If you have a vacant property, oh my gosh, that's a perfect opportunity because we can go in and do, a video, Facebook Live. There's a lot of different things we can do. And if you're a buyer, you can also consider putting in offers sight unseen. For example, if a seller doesn't want to accept offers, right off the bat sort of thing, or doesn't want people to walk through, you can submit offers sight unseen with the condition that the buyer gets to walk through the property and be satisfied with it, that type of thing. So anyways, in Ottawa, I think it's, right now, as of today, I think it's still a really good market to list and sell. It's just how you go about it. You just want to minimize the impact health-wise to everybody. Cool. Christian?
Yep.
Hey.
I was busy chatting with people.
You're a very positive person. And so what kind of opportunities do you see coming from this for landlords and investors? And I don't mean opportunities in a bad way. Like, what are some good opportunities for people?
Absolutely. I'm always kind of an optimistic person, and as I mentioned earlier, as tragic as this is, right, and what's going on, as I said, you never want to waste a good crisis to get things restructured the way that you need them restructured. So a lot of people are incented to kind of help right now, particularly on the lending side. And if we take a look at what the risk is of most investors, or real estate investors in particular, landlords, etc., just like any small business, you're going to have a cash flow crunch, right? There's a real risk in terms of rents coming in. And so far, the programs really haven't addressed a lot about directly about what we can do on the expense side. However, it doesn't mean that we can't be proactive about it. And so this is a great opportunity, for example, that if you were thinking about doing refis, get on with it. Interest rates are low. This is a great opportunity to extend your amortizations in order to improve your cash flow. There's scenarios where some mortgage products have contractually already in them that you have the ability to skip a mortgage payment or two. So that's another one that you should take a look at. If it's not in the contract, then based on my inquiries, I've talked to 3 different lenders that I deal with, and every one of them is coming back saying that if you don't have it in your contract, they're willing to discuss things like mortgage skips and mortgage payment deferrals, but they're going to be dealing with it on a case-by-case basis. So be that as it may, as long as it doesn't risk the relationship that you have with your banking institution, it is worth the discussion. The way that I've typically approached it is say, look, I'm in good shape, but I want to take a look at this as a potential long-term contingency just to feel them out and see where they're at. It's a two-edged sword, right? Because you have to be careful that a lot of these bankers have loaned you money, and sometimes it's their own reputation at stake that they went to bat for you in order to get you a particular loan.
Sure.
And it's based on the fact that they assume you know how to manage risk. So that's kind of, you have to be careful to tread the line there. Don't go in there in a panic, right, and say you're really worried about it, because next time you need a real loan, it might be a problem. Yeah,
for sure.
So refis, there's also, I talked about amortization, skip payments. There's another thing that happens that not necessarily right now, but watch for it before long, is that some of the banks will actually have some more flexibility in their spreads. So normally when, for example, with a line of credit, you'll have a prime rate that they assess it on, and then they may have an offset or a spread that they have on top of that. So it might be your fixed line of credit might be prime plus 1 or prime plus 1.5. Your unsecured might be prime plus 2 or 2.5. This is a good opportunity to say, hey, listen, I'd like to talk about reducing that spread. And depending on the position of the bank, their liquidity levels, etc., they may actually say, yeah, no problem, we can knock a quarter point off or half a point off. Yeah. So that's another good opportunity for people.
Cool. Thanks, man. Those are great. That's great tips. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hey, Tony.
Hey, I saw, I was in the chat room there a little bit, just checking things out, and you make a great point about education, right? During this time, it's a great time to, if you're not in a buying cycle or a selling cycle, whatever, if you're at home, take advantage of the situation and immerse yourself in real estate investing education. Is that your message? Is that what you're telling some people? And where can they go to do that?
Absolutely. So tremendous opportunity. Being in Northern Ontario, I don't get the opportunity to attend a lot of meetups. From what I can see across the board, we have the opportunity now to attend a ton of meetups that we wouldn't normally be able to network and learn from, listen to different speakers. you know, most of the time we're so busy with our lives that sometimes when it comes to real estate, we don't get the time that we want to have to be able to really dive in, to get to know a market, to, you know, spend several hours calling different realtors and figuring out who's the, you know, ideal fit for us as part of our power team. Like, we do a lot of bootstrapping when it comes to building a portfolio in real estate. I can't think of a better time to be able to, you know, spend a couple of hours a day and educate yourself, invest in yourself. You know, so many people are panicking and freaking out. There's stuff all over Facebook, and, you know, people are really having a tough time. And I can't think of a better way to take that fear and that panic and that uncertainty and to turn around, invest in yourself, and plan your future.
100%. You know, turn off the TV, turn off the social
Netflix.
media, pull up the Residential Tenancies Act and read it. You know, just it's a dry read, but man, just go ahead and do that. Read some different websites, even phone calls. Like I can call whoever. Let's say I see Denise and Stuart there, so I'll say I'll pick up the phone and text Denise and have a conversation. Just learn from experts like that, right? There's so much out there, so much opportunity. And Shannon, thanks, Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Hey.
Hey.
Hey. Okay, I wasn't sure if you could hear me. There you are. You look very chill. Like you're very relaxed. It looks like you're in a I don't know, cocktail room or something. Okay?
Really?
Yeah, you look very relaxed.
Just kidding. It's just ginger ale. It's not wine.
You're a dancer. You're in a cocktail room. Oh my gosh. I'll stop that.
That's pretty much how I'm approaching this situation. I mean, again, it's not the most ideal, but
yeah.
Don Campbell made a post today and he said something about this being introverts. And I said, well, honestly, I think I've been a closet introvert. And I just think that this time was meant for me to bring out my inner introvert. Like it's learning to adapt, if anything, right? And it may not be the most popular opinion, but we've been taught for years to be pragmatic, to be strategic, to be, you know, it's economics, it's highs, it's lows. And I'm not trying to diminish how anybody is feeling, but we've been told that it's not emotional. And as long as we've been prepared for this, and it's totally different. I mean, Dan's kind of chatting with me on the other end, and, you know, it's kind of like, oh my God, the sky is falling in the stock market. And well, yes, I mean, there will be influences, and we've seen it before. But if we purchased years ago and we've put those policies and procedures into place, you know, it's like somebody said, or like Kayla said earlier, I mean, we should be okay. Like, it's just protecting ourselves. And how do we do that? Right. Sorry, that's kind of why I'm chill about it. I mean,
great. Yeah.
There's enough people being emotional. You don't need to be erratic and emotional on top of that.
And it's okay to take that time away from things that affect you. Like I said, turn off the TV, get away from social media, go walk the dog, you know, go not visit some friends, but go for a drive maybe, you know, do something different, just to get away from all the constant bombardment. I think it was yesterday where, as an investor, I was sitting there and I had the TV on and I'm chatting with people, and it really, for the first time, it kind of hit me, and I just needed to unplug, and I had to go away for a few hours and just sort of reset. So it's important to keep that positive mindset and your mental health and physical health too during this time, right?
Do you know what it's
part
done?
of being a business person.
Yeah, and you know what it's done for me is it's actually gotten me off my ass in the stuff that I was procrastinating on. Darn, I can't hide it now. I'm here.
Yeah,
it's a good crisis.
Yeah. Hey, Genevieve. I think Jen's there.
Hey.
Here she is. What?
I don't know. It's like some weird thing. I'm like,
are you in San Francisco?
I don't know. Like every time I turn it on, it does this weird background. So I'm like, I'm gonna turn this off.
Coming live from San Fran by the Golden Gate Bridge is Genevieve.
I know.
Walton.
Oh man, cool
That's
background.
Cool. So, tell us what have you seen in terms of the guests who are staying? Are they? What's been their mindset and reaction to all of this? Are they showing fear? Or are they sort of like, screw it, I'm here on vacay or I'm here on business and I'll keep doing it?
Actually, the guests have been really good. I haven't heard too much for them. They've been very understanding of the situation. They've had more questions about sanitization between guests and who stayed in the property last.
Yeah.
But otherwise, they've been really, really good. I mean, the other thing is I would say a lot of our guests right now are actually our clients or friends or family of our clients as well.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and then the other part is we have a lot of businesses who stay with us. So a lot of them have either, they're staying there for that period of time, or the businesses are easy to deal with for the most part as tenants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we haven't had too much. They've been really, really good.
Cool. And are you still seeing long-term rental people, investors switching to short-term? Are you still seeing that happening?
I would say this has been a very good indication of what regulation would potentially look like at a very fast speed if it were to become implemented.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much in a full week, it was pretty much like get your units offline or find out what you want to do with your units. Now, if it went to regulation, it would probably be over, 3-month period or so of timeline. So I think this has been a good indication for hosts, at least, of what Airbnb is willing to do or not willing to do to support their hosts. And I think, a lot of people have realized that Airbnb is a glorified CRM system, which I've been saying for a while now.
Yeah.
They don't have that much attachment to their hosts. We're essentially contractors for them.
Yeah.
So I know it seems great online where they say, we've refunded everyone and all that kind of stuff, but it's kind of a friendly reminder to everyone else that, yes, they refunded everyone, but that was actually our money that was refunded. It wasn't necessarily theirs except for the service fees. So I understand the situation. I understand why they made those decisions.
Yeah.
I think, there'll be some hosts for sure that will drop out from this situation.
I think so. Yeah, for sure. Christian, I got one question for you and then another one for Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. Do you see, you mentioned in a chat there that, after this settles, after, where is it, 6 months, 8 months from now, when things pass or things improve, there'll be an opportunity for private money lenders. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So I think because of the real shakeup we had in the stock market just over the last week and a half alone, a lot of people who were overconfident in the stock market seeing outrageously good and uncharacteristically good returns over the last 2 years are finally going to get a little bit of reality check that the stock market has more of an average growth over time of about 6 to 7%. So 15% is a highly unusual event that they've seen. So with that reset, people start to think about other asset classes they should be investing in. And one of the things that's not well publicized is private mortgages, something that Denise and Stuart are online know extremely well and can certainly help people with. They're going to start to look for other places to put their money. You see Mix starting to advertise an awful lot more.
What's a Mix?
Mortgage Investment Corporation.
Thank you.
So people are looking for other vehicles to put their money. What that means as an investor is that there's, and when you're properly trained as an investor, you begin to realize access to capital is far more important than the interest rate. Yeah. And when you're working on certain projects, such as acquisitions, where you're doing some forced appreciation, you might want to take on some short-term, but perhaps expensive money in order to be able to execute on what you're doing and then later refi. I think what we're going to see is an availability of private money coming onto the market that's going to make it easier to do that. And if there's an awful lot of that coming in, then the interest rates associated with it, you may not have to pay as much of a premium. So I think there's some interesting opportunities that are going to develop in that side of it as we come out of this particular situation.
Okay, cool. Elizabeth, another private money lending question, but more along the lines of if I'm lending money to Elizabeth and Elizabeth's project has run into a snag due to COVID-19. How can I ensure that my money is safe? And if I'm anxious and worried, how can I get any of that back as a private money lender? What would you do? What would I know I'm throwing you on the spot. I know I didn't ask you this question before. So
That's okay.
just wing it.
Okay, so there's two different ways to look at it. So obviously if I was the lender, I would be reaching out to the people who I had lent my money to and basically checking in with them and saying, like, what's going on, how are we able to. We'll reach out to our private lenders as well. They're on my to-do list here, and just sort of do a touch base and reassure them. On the other hand, if there are people who want to exit immediately, I got to tell you, there are people who are going to line up to take their position. And, if I'm paying a higher interest rate as flipping sides and, being the borrower, I'm going to negotiate a lower interest rate than what I'm paying right now. So there will be people, there are always people in any time there is panic like this who kind of, they get swept away in the feelings and the emotions, but real estate should be a numbers-based business. Mm-hmm. And all of our decisions should be based on numbers. So, the real estate market, it will recover. The real estate market always recovers, but it's about making sure that we've managed our cash flow so that we can get through these tougher time periods.
Yeah, for sure.
Does that answer your question, or did I just go off on my own tangent?
No, that's great. No, there's a pearl of wisdom. Yep, for sure. Hey, Shannon, maybe we'll start wrapping up, and if you have any last comments or last thoughts. No, I don't have any questions. It's more just like your final thoughts. So maybe Elizabeth, I have you here.
I just wanted to make sure Dan's questions got answered there.
Oh, okay, yeah, fire away. I didn't see them.
He said, I've been through a few of the cycles now, and we've been on a great upswing for many years. Now with this major stock market downturn and huge potential government expense, I fear we will be put into recession. It took almost 10 years for the real estate market to recover in the 90s. I'm not panicking, but I'd like to know what others' thoughts on this.
Okay, so what's your thought? What do you think?
Well, I already chatted to him and gave him my opinion, but he wanted to get the consensus of the room from the other experts. So
sure.
If anyone else can chime in.
Christian, jump in.
Sure. So, I think Elizabeth said it in a different way earlier, but this starts to present buying opportunities. So the key is being sure that you're well capitalized. Like I said earlier, right now it's to make sure you've got lots of working capital on hand. This is a good time to refinance, not just to, manage your cash flow, but there are going to be buying opportunities. Whether you worry about, purchases that are happening right now versus 3 years from now. If, as Elizabeth was saying earlier, if you're running your numbers and you're doing a purchase based on the actual performance of the asset, then it doesn't really become material unless you're planning to sell, right? And if you're planning to sell, again, if the numbers are, and you're performing that business efficiently, so you're getting good quality revenue and rent out of it, you've minimized your expenses to drive the net operating income up, then the value of that asset is probably not going to change substantially.
Yeah. I think that we were taught to, I think if, at least in my position, what I'm fortunate in is that I bought in good places with sound economic fundamentals, bought for cash flow, and so I can ride this out. I'm in a position as a result of that to be able to ride things out.
And that's a really good point, Tony, because sometimes people, if they're not thinking through their strategy properly, sometimes will do what I'd call speculative investments. And there's different different strategies have different levels of risk. And buying on speculation is a strategy, but it's a high risk strategy. But if, the kinds of model that you were talking about, where you're putting a focus towards fundamental cash flow or focus to line of sight to cash flow, gives you a fundamental that will help protect you through these downtimes.
Yeah, cool.
And let me just add one thing as well. I'm of the opinion, and what I see often too is, also in terms of affordability, and we're still seeing the sandwich generation. So when it depends on the kind of investment portfolio that you have. So if you have a duplex or a triplex, you're in a totally different situation as opposed to being 4 or more units, because we're seeing home buyers. So they're looking for something to be able to help offset their income, and whether they live in one unit and they're renting out the other. So, I mean, I have about 5 people right now who are saying, do you have, properties like really well-suited duplexes? And so they're looking at it in terms of living in it, but what's happening is they're now competing with investors. So investors are strategic, and then it's the home buyers that kind of driving up the prices, because they're not looking at strategy, they're just looking at it from a home purchase.
Right.
Affordability.
Yeah. If anyone's wondering why I keep looking over my shoulder, it's because Barley keeps running to the door. I'm wondering what's there. So he's distracting me a little bit. Sorry about that. Elizabeth, do you have final thoughts?
Just, as investors, we need to train ourselves to do the opposite of what everybody's done or what everybody's doing. So when everybody's panicking and freaking out and, talking about selling and losing value and all those kinds of things, take a breath, stay calm. The real estate market always returns. It always rights itself. The real estate market follows cycles. This is a particularly tough one. As long as we bought for cash flow, we should be in a good position as an investor. And sometimes this is a really good opportunity. A lot of the clients I work with, they either have no properties or they have a few properties. This is a fantastic time to take a look at the properties you already own and optimize them.
100%.
Instead of, because sometimes, as investors, we get into property hoarding, where the number of units we have becomes more important than the actual returns that they're providing. Right. And this is a great time to take a look and see, maybe I can refinance, maybe I can strategically position, maybe I can take a single family home and turn it into a duplex. Yeah. There's a lot of different ways to find opportunity. Be strategic about it, keep your head, and learn as much as you can.
And there's no better time than right now than to think through where you can improve underperforming properties, or ways to increase cash flow, reduce expenses, increase the NOI of your multifamily res properties, right? There's lots of time to do that now.
Absolutely. And if you're stuck, reach out to me and we'll jump on a call, and I'm happy to, chat things through and yeah, I love connecting with people. Awesome. My schedule has miraculously opened up in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. Great. So thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing your expertise. Shannon, Christian, Jen, you're there still. Thank you very much. Hope you make it home in time from San Francisco, and remember to quarantine yourself for 14 days.
It's all right. I got an Airbnb available for that.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Hope you got a good price for it. Shannon, thank you very much, eh? That was awesome insight. And Christian, of course. We're considering, we were talking earlier, we may host another one next week, but we're thinking maybe Facebook Live for that one. We're not sure. I'm not sure how to run those. Maybe Elizabeth will take a turn at it. I don't know. But
we got you.
If you found this valuable, or if you'd like for us to host another one next week to review what happens, or what happens from today until next week, because we know things are going to change from a COVID-19 perspective, and also the real estate market, at least here in Ottawa, is changing every freaking 2 days, every day. So it's a good time to step in and just do a quick review. Maybe not an hour and a half long, but maybe something a little bit shorter, and we can answer some questions for people who might have them. Does that sound good? Cool. Thumbs up. Good stuff.
And thanks so much, Tony, for hosting this. I know there's a lot of uncertainty in the market, and thanks for taking the lead on this and helping everyone out.
You're welcome. Thanks for sharing your expertise. And that's it. We'll sign out now. Thank you. See you later.